WBNE.
Hello, and welcome to episode 171, all about the Rings of Power. Season 1, Episode 6, Udûn, being the 171st part of That's What I'm Talking About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, but right now we are all experiencing Rings of Power for the first time together. Today, I am joined by Adal Rifai. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Hey, what is that? I panicked and I'm like, oh, what do I say? Ipso facto.
Well, welcome. How are you feeling about Rings of Power? What are your thoughts as you're coming into, episode 6 was a big one, but what are your thoughts and feelings about like everything leading up to this?
I'm invested. I like it more than I thought I would. So I thought based on just whatever early reviews or early anticipatory thoughts and stuff, I think I was like, oh, it sounds like there's no names in it that I will recognize. It sounds like the budget is maybe not being seen where it should be seen. So I was a little worried, but I'm digging it. I'm really liking it. I will say, and this is no knock against this show specifically, but against all high fantasy in the last 10 years or so, like Wheel of Time and a few other ones. I just recently did a rewatch of The Sopranos, and I realized, have you ever seen it?
No, that's just not the show that I was expecting for you to like come out of your mouth.
Gandalf is Tony. Christopher is Frodo.
All I know about The Sopranos is that it has one of the most infamous / famous endings of all time.
Yes.
So,
and I actually like it. But here's what I'll say. I realized watching The Sopranos, because I hadn't watched it since it was like airing in real time. I realized what makes The Sopranos maybe the best show of all time and just kind of a perfect show is that it is the bookends of life in terms of like it is so violent and dramatic and intense, and just like there's moments where you're just absolutely gobsmacked in terms of like holy this is happening, but then 5 seconds later, or the cut to a scene where it's the most hilarious, funny, real human interaction you've ever seen. So I realized they imbue it with this almost like, it's not even sitcom comedy, it's more like real life comedy, but it's just perfect. I mean, the writing is so, you laugh, you cry, you're on the edge of your seat, you're covering your face. That to me is what makes a perfect show. I realize now when I watch high fantasy, like Wheel of Time, like Rings of Power, like House of the Dragon?
I don't know, yeah.
Whatever the spinoff is.
Yeah.
There's just no humor, and there's attempts at humor in terms of like I think it's episode 3 or something with the Harleyfoots or Barley Toes or
the Harfoots.
Thank you so much.
The Harleyfoots.
There's stuff with like the Harfoots where it's like there's the main Harfoot, like her best friend is like, let's get you out of here, like, oh bother, how get you away from here. And there's moments of like when she was hiding under the tome trying to steal a page, and her friend was directing her of like, what's not right about that is that you got left behind. Like there's some fun stuff with that, but it's just not necessarily funny. So I feel like I do miss humor, like legit humor, or like so
having like a complete showing like the whole self through this, through a show where like you're experiencing all of those emotions, where you're experiencing, serious and fright and and then those like moments of joy between characters. I think you're so right that like that's what makes that's what's like really interesting when you're watching shows and movies, is when you see all of those emotions come through that you yourself are familiar with.
Yes, and now that I've noticed that, it feels like any show I watch that doesn't have almost all the ingredients for that is almost like a bland stew to some degree. Like I'll still eat it and I'm still like yum to some degree, but I'm not like, it doesn't feel like it's sating my appetite. And to continue down the Sopranos path, there's an Italian. So Sopranos is like a mafia TV show. There's an Italian mafia TV show called Gomorrah, which was on HBO, which is really well done and just like really thrilling and really interesting. And there's not an ounce of humor. And it's just that thing of like, this is maybe like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 show, but it's just missing that humor. Even with something like Breaking Bad, it's just missing that amount of humor. I feel like maybe Succession captures that the book ending pretty well, but I think with something like Sopranos, there's so many like people will like misspeak in a sentence, and the rest of the characters just kind of move forward like you would in real life versus like whatever. So it just feels so true to life. And I know high fantasy is not necessarily trying to feel true to life. It's trying to show you a different world. But I just wish there was. I think there was one moment where I kind of out loud guffawed, which was
it might have been the same. It might have been the same moment. Okay. Yeah. Was it when the orc gets hit by the cart?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
This was, although that was pretty good. This was maybe episode 4 or something. But it's like the sea captain, the army general's son, the Numenoran Isildur. He's having like a tiff with his former best friend, and they're like, he's like, punch me in the face if you want to, and the guy hits him. And then there's a moment where he's like, listen, you're my friend, probably still my best friend, and the guy next to him goes, hey. And I'm like, that made me legit kind of like laugh, and I'm like, that imbue the rest of the show with moments like that every once in a while. I'm not saying make it all of that, but I'm just like, every once in a while, give us, because it allows for a release of tension.
Yeah.
And I feel like with the Harfoots, the humor is so I don't know. It's
they're just very lighthearted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it feels like it's just very sort of corny, or I don't know how to articulate it. But the humor is just it's very soft in terms of like I don't know, what's less than G, like not even rated G. It's like less than that, where it's like, oh, I stubbed my toe, and it's like, all right, this sucks. And not that the original movies didn't have that, the Peter Jackson trilogy. But I just wish there was a little bit more of that, the release of tension through laughter. Yeah,
I do agree. We definitely, like, it was noticeably gone in this episode.
Yeah.
And I mean, that being said, I think that was very intentional to set up that this is the episode where you're just going to be tense the entire time.
Oh yeah, this was almost like. Have you seen The Bear?
Oh, I need to continue watching it. I'm like halfway through. Yeah.
But it's like, it was almost like that, where the finale or the penultimate episode is just nonstop. Like they're getting slammed in the kitchen, and you're just like, your blood pressure is boiling, and you're like, oh God, like, are they going to get through it? This episode I thought was great in terms of like, it is not, you feel almost like they feel in terms of like, it's relentless. Day into night, back into day. It's just like, it's nonstop. Yeah.
Yeah. So this episode got a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. Of course, I say this, the ratings can very easily change since this is only, the day after the episode was released. But this is the highest rated episode so far of the season. Coming after episode 5, which was the lowest rated. And I'm just going again. I don't live and die by the Rotten Tomatoes thermometer.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
that's actually
it's a tomato meter, but you have to say thermometer. That's just so much more fun.
I dig that.
So last week's episode got a 76, which was their lowest so far. And this is, again, everything critics is just all super subjective, but I think it's helpful to see how people because sometimes I'm just like, as someone who for up until now, the whole thing with my podcast is that like I couldn't really interact with other people. I couldn't really like geek out over these things, or when I did, everyone's like, yeah, like we've been saying for the past 20 years that these movies are amazing. Where were you? So like, I'm just happy to be a part of it and like sharing that excitement in real time with other people. So for me, it's helpful to like gauge some more quote unquote objective compared to me opinions. But I think it's like really promising for this show. I think this was like a huge turning point for a lot of people who are super skeptical about the show. This episode. I also want to read out a review that was left that I just laughed at, and I'm like, this is so funny. So it says Udûn, or hell in Sindarian Elvish, which I was wondering the whole episode. I was like, what does that mean? Is an hour of surprises, hope, and ultimately bad vibes.
Bad vibes.
And that is by Matt Shimkowitz from AV Club. But yeah, just ultimately bad vibes. I'm like, yeah, that's That's a great way to put it.
Very funny low stakes term to apply to like war, where it's like,
yeah,
World
like
War II had some bad
Here.
vibes. Like World War II wasn't feeling it.
Yeah, it's just
skip me with
it's
that,
always
dude.
Great to like underplay how horrific war is.
Miss me with the Vietnam.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we've already said a lot about this episode, but just my like just general thoughts, I was just stunned and really blown away when this episode ended. No pun intended, for listeners who know what happens. I was really astonished, and not just the last, 5 minutes or so, but the whole episode was just like start to finish, just amazing quality, all around.
Oh, yeah.
Visuals, acting, score, all of it. I thought was just really like they really brought their A game with this one.
Absolutely. I really appreciated that because so far I think any sort of skirmishes we've seen in the light of day, or at least it's been well lit, they almost dipped into Game of Thrones territory where there was some action sequences that were pretty dark, like the lighting was very minimal. And I watched during the day, so there's some light coming in my window, so I couldn't see a few elements. But I really appreciated that they then took it back into the day. So yeah, I thought it was really well handled, really well shot.
Yeah. So listeners, we're going to jump now into the dirty details of this episode. If you have not watched it yet, go, like, I always say, like, if you haven't watched it yet, go, but legitimately go watch this episode right now. I woke up on Friday morning, and in my time zone, the episodes come out at midnight, and like, I'm tired, y'all. I'm not going to stay up until 1:30 a.m., finishing these episodes and stuff. So I woke up, and immediately all of these other creators that I follow and collaborate with, everyone was already doing live streams and tweeting, and everyone already had like reviews up on YouTube. And I was like, oh, I need to watch this immediately so I don't get spoiled.
Yeah. Although this is, I mean, for the most part, I think this is a hard one to spoil. I think there's one key thing at the very end, like a catalyst for the ending. But I think besides that, it's kind of hard to spoil this one to some degree.
Yeah. I honestly don't even know where to begin with this episode. I guess let's talk about. So there's a few different battles throughout all of this. The first one is really clever thinking on the Southlanders' part, where Adal and his army are marching on the tower, and we see that they have... I'm just really questioning how that tower was constructed, because Arondir, the elf, shoots down like one rope and it makes the whole thing come apart. Yeah. So I'm just wondering what the construction of this tower was like.
That was a load-bearing rope. I'm also just I'm realizing now, hearing it sort of said aloud by you, that Adar's, it almost sounds like an Australian saying my name. Like Adal Rifai.
Oh, that's so true. And Adal, everyone's joking. Everyone always jokes around that the orcs are just calling this one, he's like daddy orc. Yeah. Because Adar means father. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do keep saying like, father, what should we
do? Yeah.
Like, I feel like the guy who plays Adar, maybe it's just me, I feel like he looks like Lee Pace, who was in the original trilogy.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. So I was saying, not so much this episode, because we do see a lot more of him this one, but in previous episodes, I was like, gosh, he just really reminds me of someone I don't know who. And someone tweeted a GIF, and I was like, oh, he reminds me of Noel Fielding.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could see that. But I feel like his bone structure and his eyebrows maybe look like Lee Pace. He doesn't have his build or height, but I feel like his eyebrows and face a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Shoot, let me look up. Yeah, he was like doing, I thought it was so interesting to see more of him interacting like as a leader with his people. And you see, because he gives this big speech right before they go march on the tower, and you can really see why why they're all drawn to him and why they're following him. Yeah,
he's wonderful. And I really appreciate, like you said, seeing him in a role to sort of like, command his army and everything. And there's a moment where things are crumbling, bits of rock are falling down, and he's kind of standing still. And normally you would just see the bad guy standing still while rocks fall around him and just happen to miss him, and then he carries on, and it's kind of a badass moment. I love when he was standing there, one of his minions is like move, and like I think grabs him or pushes him out of the way or something. But it was a cool moment of like, that feels real, of like, you wouldn't just, he was in shock or whatever, but it was cool to see someone help him versus the sort of badass cinematography of like, isn't it cool everything barely missed him?
Yeah. It's also interesting that he is leading this group, whereas a lot of bad guy leaders, they, like Helm's Deep, Saruman's not joining that fight. So we see him in the trenches with his people, you know. I think that was just really, we're really like learning. There's a lot more that we learn about him in this episode that just adds a lot of really interesting dimensions to these, up until now, all of us who have watched Lord of the Rings, we're like, oh yeah, the orcs are just bad guys, and now we are learning these like really interesting dimensions to them and learning about, like, he says they're individuals and they all have names, and just like really cool. Adar, by the way, is played by Joseph Mawle, so shout out to Joseph, I know you're listening. Actually, I make that joke every time I bring up one of the Rings of Power actors. But actually, if a Rings of Power actor or, behind the scenes person or anything, if you're actually listening, DM me. I want to have you on.
Listen, orc number 10, come on down. How do you feel about with the original trilogy, with this show, like I keep mentioning Wheel of Time, and a few other shows? How do you feel about I get the sense that anytime the director is at a loss for what to do in terms of a shot or something, what they'll do is just close up on an orc's face. The orc will be moving in a herky-jerky fashion, and they'll scream and like tilt their head side to side. And I feel like that gets a lot of mileage. There's a lot of gas burned with that shot. Yeah, you're totally right. Also, like kind of a similar thing. Whenever there is a white horse, it's always going to the elf. Yeah. Like there are these, it seems to be like unspoken rules almost, or unspoken things that like they do a lot, where they're like, oh, okay, we're going to show we're going to show like the evilness or something of the orcs by like zooming in on them in the battles. And it's like, oh, there's a white horse, we're giving it to the elf. Like all of these rules that they abide by. Yeah. And I guess I don't know what I expect in terms of like somebody in full orc makeup walking with like slow confidence and being like charge or something. But I just feel like every minute there's a shot of someone be like, and they have to move their head because it's almost like the orc knows they're getting a close up and they're like really working the camera. It just I think it's also a way to show off the makeup and prosthetics and stuff, to be like, see how like graphic we made the orcs look, and see what a good job we did on them. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, our next battle, the Southlanders go back to their village and they're fortifying everything, and they're waiting for all of the orcs to come at night. By this point, Arondir so he goes to hide the blade, the handle of the blade that they keep saying is the key. And he's like, no one can know where it goes. And he goes and hides it. And we later find out that he hides it like under the floorboards of the tavern in the town. And also it's almost like a kid hiding drugs under their bed, where they're like, where's the one place my parents won't look? Under the bed. And then, or like back of the sock drawer, and then or something. They come home and they're like, we need to talk. Yeah. And also, so he storms off and he's like, no one can know where this is. And we find out Theo knows where it is. Yeah. Like he was watching the whole time, supposedly. I'm like, why didn't you just like go to the woods and bury it somewhere? Like what? Like this, not good planning. Yeah. I feel like I tie it to like a chandelier or something. Like nobody ever looks up. Never. That's true. I don't know. Yeah, hidden in plain sight too. Yeah. I just have so many, like, it was one of the things, like, reading Harry Potter and reading Deathly Hallows and being like, Voldemort, why didn't you just make one of your Horcruxes, like, a grain of sand? Yeah. You know? Like, why are we not doing, like, there are
are ways to hide things and disguise things much more effectively than our characters do. But of course, like, obviously the answer is, well, plot, you know, if he actually did hide it really well, then it wouldn't.
One of my Horcruxes is a tick in Argentina.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Theo, did they, because I might have missed it, did they say or show that he did see where it was hidden?
Yeah, that's what I'm really confused about, because Arondir goes off to hide it, and it focuses in on Theo, like, sitting in the background, and he sees Arondir walk away with it, and he presumably overhears that he's going to hide it. But then it cut, and I was really paying attention to this part too, because I thought the same thing. I was like, what? Or when I was rewatching it, I was really paying attention to this one part. But it immediately cuts to them like giving the rousing speech before the battle. So yeah, I guess it's just presumed that he, I don't know. It is a lot of, I guess, just you having to connect your own dots, or, you know, just guess that, oh, okay, maybe Theo, you know, just saw he went into the tavern with it and then didn't come out with it.
Yeah, I had a theory watching, but it was later disproved. I thought maybe since his arm had like attached to it at one point, it had like drawn blood from him. Right when he first holds it, it goes into his forearm, and he has like a mark on his forearm. I assume that maybe he could sense it to some degree now that he touched it.
Yeah.
But I think that's later disproven, which we'll get to at the very end, when he doesn't notice something he should have noticed.
That's true, yeah. Because he does, at the end he does say, I feel its loss.
Oh, okay.
So that, I am with you, that like maybe he did use like spidey senses, you know, to find it or something, but that is true that if he did have spidey senses, he should have noticed that something was up. Yeah.
Just very briefly, I just want to go into the part, I think it was the first episode, that made me like really be like, am I going to enjoy this? Was Theo is hiding. It's like his mom comes home. The place is ransacked. The place is torn asunder. There's a hole in the floor. Theo opens like a little, like almost spice cabinet or pantry cabinet.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, Mom, like, be quiet. And she's like, what? And he's like, go get help. And then he slowly closes the pantry door. And I'm like, if she's leaving, you can leave. What are we doing? Like, it just seems so, it's almost like if you knocked on my door and I opened it and I go, hey, Mary Clay, someone's in my house. Go call the police. And then I shut the door. Like,
yeah, and it's like,
that's how dumb that felt to me.
Come with me.
Yes, where I'm like, I would just be like, I'm leaving. Come with me. Let's run. Versus, I don't know. That irked me, but
I had a lot of interesting critiques about that fight too, because this was also the first episode where I really felt like in my brain, I know that Bronwyn and Theo are mother and son, but I've never really felt that until this episode. And that fight sequence where she's like, okay, son, I'll leave you with the orc and I'll leave. And it's not, and it doesn't occur to her to try and save him or stick around to make sure that he doesn't get eaten until like the last second, and then she goes into the cabinet or whatever.
He has more paternal instinct towards her than she does to him.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. I want to call out this moment because it was just really, it was like really personal for me when they're getting ready for this fight. All of the, you know, elderly women and children, whoever can't fight, are in the tavern, and Theo is sent in supposedly to protect them. And he says, like, can you tell me what you used to say when I had bad dreams? And she says an exact quote from the books, from Return of the King. And it's one of my favorite moments in Return of the King I think it might be in Return of the King Extended Edition, but it's when Sam and Frodo are in Mordor and Frodo is like passed out like he does a million times throughout the trilogy. Anyway, and Sam is looking up at the sky and he sees a star emerge from the clouds and he says, "This shadow is but a passing thing. There is light and beauty forever beyond its reach." And I was like, thank you for putting in, there have been a lot of moments throughout the series where they put in almost exact quotes or really like a play off of an exact quote or something. And so I just really appreciated that attention to detail. And it's also just a really beautiful quote. And yeah, they have a battle and the orcs and Adar and everyone show up. This was the moment that I was talking about where I let out a chuckle, where it was very corny, but I still chuckled out loud. So I'm like, well, hey, what does that say about me? Where they light a cart on fire and like send it into the village to hit the orcs, and then one of them goes like, aha, the bleeding fools missed us, and then they all laugh. And then you just hear him go like, huh? And he like turns and almost like looks at the camera and then is immediately slammed by the cart. And it was very corny. But again, I laughed. So
I think you're right that is one of the better, that is maybe the second funniest moment of the series. Just in terms of like the misdirection and like him being able to like speak to that versus just kind of growling or snarling. I thought it was pretty great.
Yeah, like it was very cartoonish, but again, I guess I have a cartoonish sense of humor, so it worked for me. Really, like, cool battle sequence here. The villagers, I mean, how can you not? That's part of why everyone loves Two Towers and Helm's Deep, is it's like, oh yeah, like this ragtag army is standing up and fighting against this really formidable force. And so, of course, you know, kind of getting some similar feels here. They're doing pretty good.
They're doing very well. There's a bummer moment where I think immediately, maybe when they first light that little carriage or something, there's a woman who's just standing with her,
she just stands there.
She's standing next to the carriage, no weapon. I think her arms are at her side. And she, like, as this guy is like attacking, it's like either run or like get a weapon, or I don't know. I don't know what the options are. But she stands there and gets her throat absolutely slit.
Yeah. So that being said, we do still see moments where like it's not just like, okay, they're, you know, it's not like a perfect picturesque fight where it's like, okay, the bad guys are being killed and our good guys are safe. Like people are getting slaughtered, you know, left and right. There's this is one of my critiques with the episode. This fight sequence of Arondir with this one orc, it's pretty cool at first. And the actor Ismael Cruz Cordova is showing off some really cool combat skills and everything.
There's almost like some capoeira or something. There's like a kick he did where it's like, ooh, that was cool.
Yeah, like it was really cool. And I still think that every time he's doing a fight that they're really trying to emulate a lot of the like Legolas vibes from the original trilogy, that everyone in the 2000s was just like, oh my God, did you see him skateboard that shield down the stairs, you know? And Legolas is doing these just like insane things. And of course that the horse trick he does where his like shoulder dislocates where he swings up on the horse with Gimli.
I feel like there's a moment, maybe I'm misremembering. I think there's a moment where he shoots an arrow behind him. Like it's that old trope of like someone's running up behind you and you stab hoping you get him right in the gut. I feel like Legolas has a moment like that where you're like, come on.
So getting a lot of those vibes where they're really trying to be like, see, our elves are still cool and hip. So but then it gets just really long and drawn out where he's almost getting killed by the orc and the orc's eyes like dripping black blood onto him. And this episode is really gory compared to how people view Tolkien adaptations. This one is, I think, like the goriest we've seen so far.
Oh yeah. I would say the fight with the big guy. Here's my two things. One specifically about the big guy, and two about the overall the episode and the fight. Anytime there's a guy over like say 6'10" or something, I hate that they just have him throw whoever he's fighting. He just throws him 20 times, and I'm like, yeah. You have the size advantage. Stop throwing him. He's just going to get up and like he'll figure out a way. So big guys, if you're in a fight, don't just keep throwing the person. Choke them out. Do something.
I was going to say, what's your suggestion then? If you're the big guy in a fight, what would you do?
Punch, hit. I mean, this guy was trying to kill him. So like snap his neck or I don't know.
Yeah.
But just don't keep throwing him. You give him opportunities every time. Two, I think my biggest qualm overall with the episode, which I really enjoyed, I would say this is like a A-, B+ episode, probably A-. My biggest qualm is that they rely so heavily on what I like to call the last second savior, where there is like 50 moments where someone's about to get run through, someone's about to get thrown down a well, someone's about to whatever, and then someone comes in, someone's about to kill someone, and they're like, stop. You know, it's just nonstop last second savior moments, and I think it was overkill to where I'm like, let something happen or have there be a different method in which the thing doesn't happen. It just
the last second save is too late.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Like that would be cool. Of course I say that, and that's probably going to happen, and then we'll all be emotionally devastated.
Yeah, so like, how could you? But I felt like I couldn't help but notice it when it was like moment 10, moment 11, moment 12. I was like, okay, I think we're overusing this device. Like, maybe there's something else we can do.
And that's why I thought the fight between Arondir and this one orc went on way too long, is because everyone knew that Bronwyn was going to come in and save him at the last second. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm like, this is why all of the episodes are going over an hour long. Yep. Is because you're at like, these are things that you can cut. Yep. Like just, if the ultimate thing that's going to happen here is Bronwyn is going to come in and save him, like, let's just cut to that. We don't need to see 30 straight seconds of them struggling with a knife and almost getting stabbed in the eyeball.
Yep.
Yeah, so they win. Yay! Except for they find out that they were fighting their own people who had turned and gone to Adar. And in this episode, there's a lot of like emotional highs and lows of like, all right, they won the battle, but we still have more orcs coming, and Arondir's fighting, he's gonna die, and then he's, so it's this very triumphant moment, and then they realize they were fighting their own people. And I love that realization because they see that the blood is red and not black. Yeah. And then they're immediately hit, they're like orc snipers getting ready to take them out, and they're just like cut down by a bunch of arrows. Yeah.
I want to say Snorks.
Snorks.
Is it sort of a portmanteau of sniper and orc?
Snorks? Yeah, orc, yeah, some Snorks.
Although I think Snorks was like an 80s cartoon with like basically underwater Smurfs.
I was going to say, okay, now I got to look this up.
Were they Snorks or Snorkels? Maybe it was just Snorks because it was short for Snorkels. But
it definitely it's a 1984 cartoon. Yeah.
And they have like little they have basically like straws in their head. Yeah.
Yep. Some Snorks. Yeah, they're all getting like mowed down, and I get that it was slow-mo, but it was at a point where I was like hit the ground, run away, take shelter, do something. But they're all just standing out in the open for a while before they're finally like, go into the tavern. Yeah. Bronwyn gets hit. And this was another moment that I thought was just so excessive of them healing her. And it was also, I was cringing the whole time because it was so up close on like her wound and the arrow. And by the way, if you get shot with an arrow, I thought that was like number one, like medical advice is if you get like stabbed or anything, don't take it out until you're absolutely sure that you can get it treated.
Yep, that's what they say. Leave it in. I will say one moment I really appreciated, just because I think it goes against some amount of a trope, is when she's on the table, she says something of like, help him, because there's like an older man who was shot or something with an arrow. And so I really appreciated that she was like, there's other people here, like just because I'm the main character of this show, don't just treat me over this other person. But then they showed that he had passed away because his wound was too severe or he was too old or whatever.
I think he got shot twice or something.
That would do it. But I just really appreciated that it's like, there's other characters in this world. Just because I'm being filmed doesn't make me
just because I'm the main character doesn't mean I'm the main character.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually very much appreciate that.
Yeah. They do heal her. It was really funny. So like I mentioned, I was live tweeting my first watch through, and I was in the middle of writing a tweet because there's a fake out moment where she's going to die. And with a lot of these original characters and everything, I just don't know what's going to happen. I was like, sure, she might actually die. I have no idea. So I was like mid writing the tweet being like, are you kidding me? Like that was such a waste of a character. They were really setting her up to be a really great character. What a waste. I can't believe. And then as I'm typing this out, she like, and I was like, oh my God, thank you. Yeah. She just woke up. It's fine.
I totally thought, and I don't know the lore behind it, so maybe I was ignorant to it. Well, I definitely was ignorant to it, but I thought she's dead, and then I thought they were going to put that cursed sword in her hand.
Ooh.
And I was like, that will bring her back, but she'll have like an edge to her, or she'll be maybe not fully the same or something. So I was like, that's what they're going to do. It's going to be a desperate measure, but they went a different route.
Yeah. Actually, that's pretty similar to what happens at some point in the Silmarillion. I think it's in the story of Beren and Luthien, and Beren gets one of the Silmarils And long story short, they're in this battle and he is like mortally wounded, and they place the Silmaril in his hand, and it like revives him just long enough to take him back home and be able to like say goodbye to his girlfriend at that point, or wife, or whatever.
Or both.
So that is that you know, is an interesting, you know, thing to think about. I mean, this whole episode, because again, I woke up on Friday morning and I was like, ooh, something insane happened. So the whole time I was like, oh, is Theo actually, for a bit I thought we might be dealing with different timelines, and that like we were gonna see the Numenor elves show up, and it was actually like 60 years later from the Southlanders or something. So I was like, oh, is Theo a young Halbrand?
That would have been cool. Oh, shit.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, all of these things.
That would be, it's like the current battle in the Southlands, the Numenorians racing towards them, the Southlands, Numenorians racing to them, and then when the Numenorians get there, Theo's like, 62 or something. That would have been very interesting. So you mentioned the Silmarillion. Is Rings of Power based fully on the Silmarillion?
So it's really, I know Silmarillion is a nonsense word.
It sounds like you're about to say a city, but you're drunk. You're like, where am I from? I'm from Milwaukee. Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin.
Yeah. So the Silmarillion is a very comprehensive, let's say, detailed history of Middle Earth.
Okay.
And it takes place, you know, it starts like the Bible of there was nothing and then God made something is exactly how it starts.
It came out, I feel like I remember it came out in like 2007 or something. Didn't it come out fairly recently, or is this an older one?
I don't know when. It was put together and edited by his son Christopher Tolkien, and it was I think it was published posthumously.
Okay. Because I do feel like I remember, maybe I was in college or something, but I feel like I remember it being a big deal that it was being released, but I just wasn't interested because it seemed like it was not really a story. It was more like a atlas or
okay, so it was published in 1977. So definitely not 2007.
Yeah, no, I was not in high school then.
But they might have done a re-release
gotcha.
Publication
when the
later on
came out
with
or
additional notes or something. But anyway, so it's all about the history of Middle Earth and goes through the first age, and I don't even know if it goes to the second age. But the show, Amazon does not have any rights to the Silmarillion.
Gotcha.
The only thing that they have rights to is I think Lord of the Rings, I guess, and The Hobbit maybe. But the main thing is the appendices to Lord of the Rings.
Gotcha.
And then I think the Tolkien estate granted them specific rights to specific parts of the Silmarillion. That being said, the final section in the Silmarillion is called Of the Third Age and the Rings of Power.
Oh, okay.
So, which I actually, ironically, have not read yet. My scheduling didn't allow for me to read that part before the show started.
Maybe for the best, because you'll be surprised to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you know what? I think it'll be fun because then I can, you know, predict things and be more surprised by stuff.
Yeah.
It's not a Silmarillion adaptation, is the short answer to your question.
Thank you.
It's also not really an adaptation of anything because they're compressing timelines, because some of the things that Galadriel is doing in the show are things that happened to her in like the first or second age, but because she's an elf, you can't have her experience those things and then have like these humans in the same episodes, because then like by the time the next episode happens and time has passed, like those humans are dead.
Yes.
So, but anyway, they are all hunkered down in the tavern, and the orcs are coming in for this like final wave, and Adar comes in. This is when Theo reveals, because they're about to kill Bronwyn, and he's like, here's the blade. And that I respected that decision from him, because everyone so far has just been saying like, well, obviously Theo is evil, and obviously he's going to be, a lot of people think he's going to be the Witch King,
okay,
or he's going to be one of the Nazgul. who are, reminder for listeners, the Nazgul are originally 9 men who were corrupted by Sauron when they received a ring. So it could be Theos. That's why everyone's like, oh, he's going to be evil and all this stuff. But if he, was handing this blade over to protect his mother, I'm like, that's a character choice that I respect and understand.
Decent thing. But he does seem off. There's something wrong with
something
that boy.
off.
Yeah. There's something wrong with that boy.
Yeah. I still don't trust him. I've said that he just comes off to me like almost any child in a horror movie where you're like, obviously that kid is haunted, or that's the kid who welcomed the demon into the house, As they get the blade and everything, and as this is happening, we hear the stampeding because the Númenórean army has arrived. Again, a lot of Helm's Deep feelings are I think they're trying to be recreated here, but also you can't recreate that because when you do it so great the first time, why recreate it at all?
Yes, don't cheapen it with a second attempt.
Yeah. So backing up a bit to Numenor's side of this plot, we've been seeing them throughout this episode. They're on the boats. There's a really beautiful scene, I think, between Isildur goes up onto the ship deck because he can't sleep. After sharing an apple with his horse, by the way, which I was like...
That was a weird moment. I thought at first he was...
I get it's to show how close they are, but...
Yeah. I thought actually he was teaching him how to eat. Because he put it under his mouth and the horse didn't do anything, and then he bit into it and then he put it back under and the horse took a bite, and I'm like, did he just teach this horse how to eat?
How to eat?
I was like, this is dumb. And then I'm like, oh, this just they're best friends or something.
Yeah. And he's awake and Galadriel comes over to him. This is so this is the first time Galadriel and Isildur have met, and I think this is really interesting because we're probably going to see, knowing what Isildur becomes. Adal, do you know what Isildur becomes?
I don't know. No, I don't.
He's the guy in the prologue of Lord of the Rings and Fellowship who does not throw the ring into Mount Doom.
Oh.
He's the one who Elrond, yells, cast it into the fire, and says, I was there when, the weakness of men failed 5,000 years ago.
So we have to hate this guy.
Well, that's the thing. We don't necessarily hate him right now because he's just like a young boy.
Yeah. There's a really phenomenal moment where he goes on deck with Galadriel, and she's almost like if you ever walk into like a record store with like a hipster behind the counter or something, where he's like, we'll be at land soon, and she goes, you can't see the land? You'll probably see it in like an hour. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've been looking at the land for like 3 days. Yeah.
So true. She's like, I've already seen it, but with your human eyes will be able to see it any minute now.
It's like, I saw Royal Tenenbaums. Who's this Elliott Smith? It's like, I've been listening to Elliott Smith since 92, so no big whoop.
So true. But the scenery is really beautiful because then the sun rises up over the horizon, and I have to wonder, I'm like, it looks so realistic that I'm like, they had to have done that on location, but at the same time filming like on an ocean with the sun rising, that's got to be impossible. There's no way that was
the
real.
Ordeal. Although they do have famously a $1 billion budget, so
yeah,
could be done.
So I also just never underestimate the beauty of New Zealand. Like, New Zealand is just so perfect for Middle Earth, so it makes but it was like, so again, I don't think there's any way that they could have like actually filmed that in real time, which means the, special effects and CGI is just really great, that I'm wondering if it was, quote unquote real or not. Elendil comes up and says, he's like, I don't have a good feeling about this, basically. He says, usually I'm looking to the sun rising over the sea, and now we're riding into the dawn, but I feel like we're sailing into the dawn, but I feel like we're sailing into, the coming of a dark night or something. And when I rewatched the episode, that really just stuck out to me from what happens later on. I was like, you weren't necessarily wrong there.
And there's a very funny moment where I think she says, like, Galadriel's like, how'd your wife die? And he goes into this, like,
and he just ignores it.
He goes into this flowery, ominous speech, and then he's like, she drowned.
She drowned.
That was real throwaway line about your wife.
I really don't like it in movies and shows and stuff when someone asks a question and then they're just like, I mean, I get that's why these are TV shows and movies, is because they're, you know, they're more dramatic than real life. But in real life, you wouldn't be like, you would never give a really poetic speech about, you know, the sun rising and setting and then be like, she drowned and then walk away.
It feels like, I feel like there's so many movies and TV shows where someone will be like, it's like someone's captured and bound to a chair or something. It doesn't even have to be that moment, but someone will be like, why are you doing this? And they'll be like, when I was 7 years old, I would go to my grandma's farm and catch fireflies in a mason jar. I'd poke holes to make sure they breathed, but one night I forgot to poke. You know, it's this whole like, oh, I guess we're getting a big backstory for like a simple question. So I don't know. Yeah.
Another potential critique of this episode is they arrive real fast because they say, oh, we're maybe they say like we're a few hours from shore, but then they say it's a day's ride to the, you know, the Southlands. But I thought we were going to see a scene, or I thought we were going to see more of their army like traveling throughout the Southlands and like seeing all of the other villages destroyed before they get to this village.
Yeah.
But it seemed like they just immediately knew where to go.
That was my big thing, was I was like, because I was there was a few moments where I was on my phone for 20 seconds or something, but I felt like I was still paying attention. But I looked up and I was like, they were on the boat and now they're racing to help these people in the battle. And I'm like, how do they know they're in the battle? And it seems to be just like one little farmhouse with a well or something. It just seemed weird to be like, how did they know exactly where to go?
Yeah, so that is me. I don't know. Maybe we'll see more of that later. Actually, that's a lie because certain things happen.
Their tracks are covered.
Yeah. But yeah, they show up. They save the day. There's a lot. Again, there is a lot of last minute saves where like, so Isildur's friends, Valendil, and then is the one who I refer to as the other one, who is not, you know, his best friend. There's a moment between them. Elendil is about to be killed, and then Halbrand comes in and like stabs the orc with a spear. And so yeah, lots of last minute saves. You're so right.
And there's also a trope within a trope, which within the last second save is a last second save with a nod. Where it's like the one guy throws a spear, and then the guy who was saved looks up, and it's like a little nod, and then he's off to fight more. I
kind of interpreted that because Elendil was so distrustful of Halbrand and Galadriel when he originally rescued them. So
That's fair. Like, we're good.
You know,
like,
be like, okay, we're even now.
Don't forget,
or whatever.
It's almost like, I want you to see my face to know who saved you. Are we good? Great, I'm moving on.
Yeah, we cool now? Good. Some really cool Galadriel like horse acrobatics as she's like bending over sideways with the sword. And someone on Twitter was like, I can just hear all of the comments now saying how unrealistic it is, so I'm just going to remind you of this. And then they tweeted that scene of Legolas in Two Towers like dislocating his shoulder to get on the horse.
Women can dislocate their shoulders too, everyone.
Although, I mean, like, I have to say, like, that moment with Legolas so clearly looks like CGI. It seemed to me, I don't think it was actually the actress. It was probably, you know, a stunt writer. But that definitely seems like something that it looked like really realistic. I really hope that they release some kind of, like, behind-the-scenes stuff for this episode.
See that, yeah.
Because it was so, like, there was so much happening that I'm like, knowing Lord of the Rings and knowing how they like to do things here, I'm sure so much of this was practical effects.
Absolutely. Something I wanted to ask with Halbrand, what's his name?
Mm-hmm,
Halbrand. Yeah. Do you think they purposely cast someone who looks Viggo
exactly
Mortensen's little brother?
I don't know.
I think it had to make an impression in the audition room.
I've made like a million like tweets and TikToks thirsting over Halbrand at this point. And also like that's like what I became known for on TikTok was like thirsting after like Aragorn.
You have a type.
So yeah. So obvious to me that I have a type. But it just had to be like, because in the previous episode when they do that reveal shot where he's in his armor and he's like going with them, he looked so much like Aragorn. It's really eerie, crazy. Yeah. Meanwhile, Adar he's running away with the key, and Galadriel and Halbrand go after him. I appreciate that they tripped the horse instead of stabbing him, because it looked like he's just gonna like javelin the horse, but he tripped him.
It is funny, after the trip, the camera is like, we know what you're thinking. We're gonna linger on the horse until it puts both its hooves up in front, then all four stand, and then it runs off, and then they're like, now we'll cut back to the action.
Yeah. It's like, he's okay. Mm-hmm. He's safe. Just like really great quality. Like, oh my God, I love this scene. And there's a scene afterwards with that's kind of like paralleling this too with Galadriel and Adar. But Halbrand goes over and is like, "Do you remember me?" No. Just such that, Thanos vibes of, I don't even know who you are.
Which is, I think maybe the first thing to do it was Mad Men. The main character, Don Draper's in an elevator, and I forget the other character, but another character walks in and he's like, I think da-da-da-da-da of you. And then Don Draper takes a minute and like blinks at him and furrows his brow and he goes, I don't even think about you. And it's like, that's very good.
Yeah, it's stone cold. Yeah. So Galadriel prevents Halbrand from killing Adar. They capture him. Meanwhile, everyone in the village is celebrating, and it's like, we still have 15 more minutes left.
Something's not right.
There's still 2 more episodes in the season after this one. I don't trust, bad vibes.
It'd be funny if it was just 2 hours and 15 minutes of like planning a parade. Like, choreographing dances and
actually everything is good. Everyone's just going to be happy for the next 2 episodes. Yeah. And Galadriel is talking with Adar. We learn, this is one of the questions everyone's been wondering, who Adar is. And there's still some mystery to it, but we find out that Adar is one of the elves that Morgoth kidnapped and corrupted to make orcs. And so that's how, for those that don't know, that's how orcs came to be. Is in the beginning, some of the elves left Middle Earth to go over to where the gods were, the Valar. Mm-hmm. And some of them stayed behind. A lot of those elves were captured by Morgoth, the evil guy.
And anytime I hear that name, I truly cannot help but think of like a Hot Topic promo ad or something, like #Morgoth. Like, I just cannot
Morgoth.
Yeah, I cannot disassociate that anytime I hear it, truly my brain goes there.
Oh my God, Hot Topic needs to hire you for like marketing and PR, because Hot Topic actually did just release a new like Lord of the Rings inspired line because of Rings of Power.
Hot Topic, get on it.
Yeah. So he captured a lot of the elves and, tortured them and corrupted them. And over time, they became what we see as orcs. And so that's who Adar is. He's one of these elves that was captured by Morgoth and corrupted. Still a lot of questions. I'm like, okay, well then why didn't you turn into an orc? Like, what was special about you that you stopped turning into an orc?
He's got some funky like dark veins in his face or something, right?
Yeah, like he still doesn't look right, but he's also still not an orc yet. So and this is where like we learn more about it draws in a lot of like ethical questions here, because Galadriel's like, I'm going to kill every last one of you and leave you alive. And it's also, a lot of people were saying on Twitter and everything, like, well, it's not like they asked to get captured by Morgoth. Like, this is someone who is a prisoner and was like corrupted against his will.
Yeah.
So
there's a very funny like instantaneous like pendulous swing from Galadriel where she's like, I'll kill them all and leave you alive. And then he says something and she goes, you'll die first. And it's like, well, like for how stone-faced she is and how calm and not calm, but like even keel she seems to be, it was like a real just pendulous swing. I also feel like this is maybe, if not my favorite, one of my favorite moments in terms of like when he gives his he gives his response and he's like, we have hearts too, we deserve a home too. I really appreciate it's in the Michael Keaton Batman, which I think it was like 91 or something, 92. Jack Nicholson plays the Joker. And this is, I guess, also when Heath Ledger played the Joker, he said the same thing in an interview. But it's basically like you have to play the bad guy as if he's the good guy. Like there's no way as an actor to do a good job as a villain if you play it as a villain. So it's like, in my head, I'm right. When Heath Ledger played Joker, he's like, I'm Batman. I'm the savior of the city, and Batman's the villain. So I love that they gave this moment of like, we have hearts too, we deserve a home too, to be like, oh yeah, they are living creatures, and they, the world is big enough for hopefully everyone, but it does make you, even though you still hate him and you recognize him as evil, there is a pause of like, oh shit, that's, especially in today's climate of like the political upheaval of just like vilifying everyone who doesn't stand with you and then being like, I guess they deserve happiness, but sometimes it's hard to see through the fog of like frustration and anger.
Well, and it's just really interesting because he says, very confusingly, he says that after Morgoth's defeat, things are happening, and he says, I killed Sauron. And Galadriel's like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that, like, you're the leader here or you're the one leader. I don't, so that's kind of confusing. And he explains that Sauron thought he was like restoring Middle Earth and was bringing everyone together and restoring balance. And that's ultimately, like, it's exactly what you said, that, they think they are doing the right thing. And that's also what our heroes think that they're doing. They think that they're restoring Middle Earth. Yeah. And it's just, the ways that people are going about it are maybe a bit different.
What I can't remember. Is Sauron a wizard, or is he, do we know what he is?
So he is technically, I hate that I know all of this now.
Please let me know.
So the Valar are the gods, right? Yeah. Morgoth, also known as Melkor, that's another one of his main names. He's like Lucifer. He's like a fallen god who, turned evil. And beneath the Valar are Maiar, which are, I think they're like their servants, so to speak. So they're
like a Balrog a Malar? Or is that even lesser? Okay.
I can't speak to the Balrogs because I don't remember exactly, and so I don't want to say anything wrong. But the Maiar they're like servants. If we're going with like the Valar are the gods, the Maiar are kind of like demigods.
Gotcha. And
Sauron is a Maiar that Morgoth like got over to his side and like corrupted.
Gotcha.
And I believe Sauron was a Maiar. He was like a spirit of like fire or something. And so he is a Maiar that turned into Morgoth's like right hand man.
Gotcha. I asked. Yeah. Thank you. I asked because I know like Gandalf, when he dies, it's like Gandalf's dead, and like you could easily say he was killed by whatever. But then he is reborn anew, more powerful. So it's that thing of like, is that the same with Sauron, where it's like when he dies, he's just kind of reborn, even more powerful? He
might be. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and then would that explain the comet to the Earth with the mysterious man?
Yeah, I have no idea. The reason Gandalf comes back is because he dies, and the Valar decide, hey, we're not ready.
Yeah, you need to go back. Not done.
Yeah, like you need to go back and finish this.
Anytime I stay at a Marriott, it's the same thing where I check in at 1 and they're like, come back at 4, your room's not ready. I will say I always joke that's like my least favorite moment in movie history is when, even though I love the original trilogy, when they find Gandalf and they're like, Gandalf? And he goes, Gandalf? I do not know him. I am Gandalf the White. And it's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
It's like Adal. Yeah. It's like Adal. Adal? Who is Adal? I'm Adal Rifai. It's like, get the f*** out of here. You know what I meant.
Let's go ahead and jump to the end then, where amidst all the celebrations, Arondir goes over and sees Theo, and he hands him item that has been wrapped up that they have stolen back from Adar and says, you know, I think to help you separate yourself from this thing, this is what I was talking about earlier, where he says, I felt its loss. I'm connected to it somehow. I felt its loss. And Arondir says, you know, go give this to Numenor and they will throw it into the sea. And he unwraps it and it's a decoy, which like we all should have seen coming. And I'm sure a lot of people did, but at the same time, like, just like when you're in the moment watching the episode for the first time, you're kind of just like, there's so much happening. Like Adar is almost killed by Halbrand, and then Galadriel pulls him back, and then the reverse of that happens later, and then Isildur and Elendil are saving each other, and like all this stuff is happening. And so when the decoys reveal, this was another one that I was like mid-tweet being like, so are we really going to trust Theo to just hand this thing over? And I was mid-tweet and then I, you know, saw and I was like, oh, dang, it's a decoy.
It's like a hatchet or something.
Yeah. And so this is where the rewatch was really helpful for me, because before right as Numenor shows up, Adar says to the like main villager guy, says, Waldreg, I have a task for you. And then we immediately cut to like them, you know, the horses, you know, storming on. And then when we see that the decoy has been revealed, we cut to Waldreg and he is back at the tower and he is unwrapping and he is putting the blade on top of the rest of the sword. I'm kind of like, why didn't you guys like destroy that little shrine thing as soon as you found it? Like, why would you not destroy it somehow?
I do want to say when they who's the main elf who fights the
Arondir?
Arondir, thank you so much. I'm terrible with names in this show. When there's one of my favorite moments is Arondir at some point before the big battle, after the tower, but before the village battle, Arondir is banging it with a hammer, and then someone comes up and he's like, he literally says, this is beyond our skill to destroy. And I'm like, beyond your skill to destroy? You were hitting it with a hammer.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
did we try everything yet?
It's like knocking on a door and being like, can't be broken. It's like, well, you tried your hand.
Yeah, it's like, knocking on a door and being like, well, I guess we can't get in. It's like, have we tried picking a lock? Yeah. Have we tried to open it? Is it even locked to begin with? Like, let's try to problem solve this.
Hitting something with a hammer and then saying, this is beyond our skill is like, that is fucking hilarious.
I mean, like, to be fair, I kind of assumed that maybe this was the tail end of him. Maybe he had been trying a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
And this was the last resort. But yeah, totally.
Tied it between two horses and then put them in opposite directions, maybe.
And then the horses break in half instead. Oh my God. That's terrible. Get that image out of my head now. Yeah, so it releases like it like breaks some dams, I guess, of this river that runs through the entire lands. And this is where we learn why. So the orcs and everything had been tunneling first to attack all the villages and like kidnap these people. But the ultimate goal was that these tunnels all run underground throughout this entire land. And this is where I was like, oh, I would love to see the practical effects of like filming on set, where you see all of these bursts of water like exploding, the pressure building up and exploding out of the land in the village. And everyone's like, what's happening? Then it diverts into this mountain where underneath is a bunch of lava sitting dormant, and it ignites it, and we see the most spectacular explosion that I was like, did they actually film a real volcano exploding?
I think there was one in Iceland recently, so it could have been.
Could have been. Oh my God, you're so right, because I remember when that was happening, everyone on Twitter was like, have we checked? Has someone thrown a ring into that recently? Like, everyone was making a bunch of Mount Doom jokes, you know? Like, somewhere in, you know, nearby, there's some hobbits walking towards that mountain.
You just reminded me of another missed opportunity. Mountain Doom? Come on. Mountain Doom Code Red, Mountain Doom Baja Blast. Why are all these brands dropping the ball?
Let's go back in time to... That would have been perfect for 2000s marketing too.
All these like, gamers drinking Mountain Doom.
Mountain Doom. Yeah. Oh, so good. So good. Yeah. So Mountain Doom explodes and we see you know, like what I imagine like Pompeii was like.
Yeah.
Just mass destruction, ash.
It is funny,
everything.
the initial explosion, and surely there's more. It's going to be a continuous like firework, but the initial explosion shows like 8 larger chunks of like flaming chunks off in different directions and diagonals, and then they show the village, and the village gets hit with like 50 chunks. So it is funny of like this poor village got, for whatever reason,
decimated.
For whatever reason, the volcano was aiming like anywhere it exploded outward seemed to aim straight for that village.
Well, and that's what's left a lot up to like theorizing and predictions and interpretations and stuff, is that we don't necessarily know like geographically where they are compared to what we know Middle Earth to be later on. Like some people have mapped out a few things based on what we saw from the Harfoot's migration path. Some people have been like, oh, well, I compared it to this river and I think they're over here. So we don't technically know like how close or where they were, but like now we know that like we are watching Mordor be created in this moment.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very powerful moment. And they do, I mean, they're not precious with the villagers in terms of like the Southlanders. Like some of them eat it.
No, they're dead.
Some of them eat it in a bad way. And there's even a cool shot of like, people say take cover or something, and they show like a stone bridge or something. And I think maybe Theo's next to it or something. I was like, oh, maybe that stone bridge would be, it's like standing in the doorway during an earthquake. And immediately that bridge just gets destroyed. Yeah. I'm like, oh, maybe not. So it was nice to be kept on my toes a little bit.
Yeah. And this whole time Galadriel she just turns around and stares and just stands full force into this plume of smoke and volcanic ruin. And what I love so much, so this image right here of her standing with her sword and like looking in horror at this thing, this is like this was like one of the first images we saw from the show be released. There was like it was a Vanity Fair article released in like February, I think. And this was, I think the image right at the top was this picture of Galadriel in her armor with her sword. And we've been looking at this for months. And just who knew that this is what was happening in that picture? And
even the previews with her covered in ash look incredible. Like it just looks stunning. So I'm very excited to see the next episode.
Yeah. It's just so, I just can't wait to see what happens in the next episode, because it's like, how do any of these people survive? We obviously, like, we know Galadriel, the people that we know survive this are Galadriel, Isildur, and Elendil, because they all make it to exist later on in the lore. I think that's it. Yeah. Aside from, I'm just like, but how do those 3 even make it? There's no way. So just incredible. Again, like I said, I was just stunned, and I just sat there like, that was insane. Yeah.
Very, very satisfying. Very, leaves you speechless as the credits roll.
Yeah. So, there was still like a few other like minor moments happening in the episodes, like between characters, but that was just like, again, just start to finish. I thought the quality and the like attention to detail that they were putting into these battles, which I just thought they were all really well constructed, because it can be hard to make battle sequences and fights and like destruction interesting to watch. Yeah. Especially if you're doing it for over an hour. Yes. So I think they did it so well.
Yeah, agreed.
Did you have a particular favorite moment from this episode?
I think my legit favorite moment is maybe Adar talking about "we have hearts, we deserve homes" was just a really cool, powerful moment. I think my funny favorite moment was there's a moment when everyone's like, when what's her name, Bronwyn gets shot and everyone's going into the tavern. There's a moment where we see like a man and a woman running towards the tavern, and a guy behind them gets shot with an arrow. So the guy who's with the woman sees this guy behind him get shot with an arrow. He turns around and is like, oh, this guy got shot with an arrow. Let me help him up. So he picks up the guy. The woman picks up the other arm, and the two of them like march this guy towards the tavern to help him after he's been shot with an arrow. And then almost immediately, the guy who helped, who was unscathed, gets shot with an arrow and falls to the ground. And the guy he just helped turns around, looks at him, and keeps going forward. And I'm like, That's the funniest.
I can't believe you noticed that. That's hilarious.
That guy just helped you.
That's cold.
That's ice cold. He just helped you. Then he gets hit and you're like, that, like, what are we doing? We're just going to keep getting struck. So I was like, that's a moment where I'm like, that feels real in a good way in terms of like, I appreciate that's the consequence of helping someone is like, absolutely, like no man left behind, and then like thwang, it's like, oh shit, like now I'm also hurt, I'm dead. So I actually legit appreciated it, but the way it played out was very funny.
My favorite moment, first, like just a special shout out that we finally got a kiss between Bronwyn and Arondir, because they had been playing up so much of their like romantic tension, and I'm like, finally, they kissed. Yeah. That's great.
I dig their story. I like their story.
Yeah, and it was also it was such a Tolkien moment because he was talking about trees and like growing things after this battle, and that's just so quintessentially Tolkien. But my favorite moment, of course, everyone, is the what are we calling this? Let me pull up Twitter. Haladriel, which is Galadriel and Halbrand. After they have had this conversation with Adar, and they're sitting in the woods together on this log, and they're both like, thanks for pulling me back from that point of no return of revenge. And Halbrand says, I wish I could take that feeling of fighting alongside you and bind it to my very being. And then Galadriel says, I feel that too. And they are like about to kiss. Yeah. You know it's coming. And then someone comes in and says, Halbrand, Miriel requests your presence. And I'm like, you ruined everything. Like random off-screen guard, you ruined everything. I'm so pissed.
What's it? It's another last second, but not save. It's a last second. I don't what the opposite.
It's a block.
It's
we
a
can say
block.
It.
Yeah, last second block.
Oh, but like I love that scene. Oh shoot, I broke my rule. Last week I said when I choose my favorite moment, I have to choose a non-Halbrand moment. So I'll also give a special shout out to the scene between Elendil and Isildur after the battle, where they're with the horse and they're talking about like being, soldiers and warriors and stuff. And I think that was a great moment for them because we had seen a lot of strife between them as father and son and a lot of tension. And it seems like they're, reconnecting. And yeah.
I also like the moment with Isildur's friend where he's like, it's like you get a taste of battle. It's like, yeah, let me go fight let me go across on adventure and let me suit up and I want to fight and get a sword. And then after the battle, it's like, I think I'm good. Like I've had enough action for a lifetime.
That was honestly it was a really sad moment because he said, like, it is kind of played off jokingly at first where he says like, seen enough battle already for one lifetime. And you expect them, because they're friends and we've seen them joking around so much, you expect them all to play it off. But he says like, yeah, no, I'm deeply traumatized.
Yeah. And it's truly what happens in America where it's like we romanticize like being a part of the army or like defending your country or the honor and the bravery. It's like we romanticize that and we glorify it. And then it's like once you're there and you're being shot at and you come home, if you are lucky enough, it's like, this was awful. Like I'm ruined for life. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well, Adal, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
This whopper of an episode. I'm really interested next week to see the like other characters' perspectives that we didn't see in this episode of seeing, the elves and the dwarves. I'm sure that this explosion was so big that they'll see it, seeing, what are the Harfoots doing at this point. So
I think the Harfoots are going to be having a pleasant little picnic on top of a mountain. And all of a sudden,
no,
someone eats something and they're like,
that's terrible.
Someone eats something and they're like, oh, this isn't sitting right in my tummy. And there's like a rumbling and they're like, is that you? And then they just explode outward.
No, I'm putting that down immediately. Don't touch my Harfoots. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Adal Rifai, ADALRIFAI. I also do some podcasts. You can check out Hello from the Magic Tavern. It's an improvised fantasy podcast. If you enjoy Lord of the Rings, you might enjoy us. And Hey Riddle Riddle, which is me and two friends trying to solve riddles and puzzles and lateral thinking problems. And we do improv along the way.
Yeah. Listeners already know that Hey Riddle Riddle is one of my favorite podcasts ever.
Oh, hell yeah.
there was some recent episode where one of you guys were saying that one of your partners said, you still describe it as a riddle podcast? And that just got me really good, because I try to convey to my friends who haven't heard it before. I'm like, it's a riddle podcast, but also like it's just really funny. So
riddle podcast in name only.
That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. If you want to learn more about the network, you can go to WBNE.org. The cover art is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/talkingaboutpod. You can follow the podcast on social media at talkingaboutpod, and you can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at MCWhatsup, and on Instagram at MCTurnDownForWhat. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/talkingaboutpod to explore the different tiers and perks that are available. You can join Discord for $3 a month, where we are engaging in discourse, which is, of course, why Discord is named that. Anyway, we are engaging in a lot of conversations about Rings of Power, so join in on the fun. Or you can become a sponsor of the podcast, like Guy. Guy, thank you so much for your continued support of the podcast. I appreciate that you care enough to be able to share your support for something. As always, if you like what you're listening to, please make sure to rate and review. Those ratings and reviews will help me stand out among other podcasts so that people know, hey, this is a cool podcast to listen to since I've been watching Rings of Power and I want to geek out on it with other people. And one more thing before we go, next week's episode covering Rings of Power episode 7 will be released on Wednesday, October 12th instead of the usual Tuesday release. This weekend, I'm in my best friend's wedding and I don't want to be distracted with finding a time to record and edit in the midst of celebrating my friend. So episode on Wednesday, and then the week after that, we will return to our normal Tuesday release for the finale. Oh my God, I can't believe we're almost at the finale already. All right, cool. Yeah, thanks again for coming on. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Hot topic if you're listening. #MoreGoth. Mountain Dew if you're listening. Mountain Doom, code red, because the red of the lava and the magma and the ash. And so any major brands get at me. And again, if any, like you were saying, if any actors from the series, even if you're an extra, if you're behind the scenes, give an email.
Yeah, give a DM, especially
or a DM, yeah.
Hot Topic or Mountain Dew. And that's what I'm talking about.